Hello chess fans, this is Truxton analyzing a game that I played tonight against a friend in a USCF rated game over the board. Um, this was round 3 of the August Swiss. I'm playing my friend. His rating is about 1960-ish USCF. Mine is 1830 and I'm holding the white pieces. I'm very ambitious. I was very ambitious this game and was trying to get the full point. Um, and a lot is to be said about this game. And the reason why I'm making a video tonight is because I just finished playing this game about 3 hours ago. And so I want to make the video tonight, that way it's fresh in my mind and I can kind of say all the thoughts that went on in my head during the game and analyze them. What's interesting about this game is that I lost. That's what's interesting. And that's the reason why I want to make this video, is that every game I lose, what I need to do is I need to sit down, I got to hunker down, and figure out why I lost. And that's, I think, a key to improving. You know, you have to figure out the things you do wrong so that you don't do them in the future, in order to improve your play. You know, so what I'm going to do for the next probably hour or however long it takes is I'm going to pick apart each one of my moves and I'm going to discuss exactly what I was thinking, why I made the move, and possible improvements. So I guess I'll get right into it. Yeah, so in this position, I decided to play d4, and the reason is that I thought that if I played e4, my friend was going to play c5, and we get into a Sicilian defense. And the thing is that my friend knows a lot of the theory in the Sicilian, and I've played the Sicilian defense on the black side so many times to know that it's just kind of hard to play against. Now, I don't mind it. I'm not afraid of playing e4 and all that kind of stuff. But I'm ready to learn d4 openings, so I decided to give it a shot and see what my friend has to throw at me. There's a really good chance that in this video I'm going to say his name without realizing it, because he is my friend, and if I do, I'm sorry. I didn't get his permission to say his name, but I don't think he would mind anyway. So if I say it, oops. If not, then I'm going to say my friend a bunch of times. Alright, so I thought that maybe he was going to go for a King's Indian, and that's exactly what he tried for. So what I decided to do was to play the fianchetto variation on the white side. And you know, I really don't know it at all. To be totally honest with you, after these next couple of moves, in this position right here, I have never studied the fianchetto variation. That is, where white plays g3. Okay, I wish it was letting me do arrows, but it's not. Alright, let's see if I can figure out how to do some arrows. If I go back a couple of moves, okay, and then use these green buttons up here, I'm at the end of the game, it says. Well, that's annoying. Alright, so I want to use arrows, but it's not letting me. Well, that's very crucial to this video. Let's see here. I want to use arrows. How come it's not letting me use arrows? Well, this is annoying. How come? Oh boy. Might have to dump this video. Well, I don't have to dump it. Let's just see here. Is it letting me use arrows now? Okay, cool. Here we go, an arrow. Cool. Alright, so previously I had the moves already up here on the right, but I guess it doesn't let me do arrows if I do that, so I guess I'll just replay the moves from memory. Okay, knight f6. So he wants to play a King's Indian or a Grunfeld or something like that. c4 and g6. So in this position, like I said, I can play knight c3 and then get into the mainline King's Indian with him. And that's exactly what would have happened. But, you know, he knows that line so well, and so do I. You know, this position I'm not at all afraid of. But because I know that he knows so much of the theory, what I want to do is get him out of theory. And so that's why I played, in this position, I did not play knight c3. I played knight to f3. And the main reason is I want to fianchetto and just play a chess game and I'm sure that he knows some theory behind it. I don't. But from here on out, I'm out of book. I'm going to let you know right now. On move 3, knight f3, I'm out of book. Okay, so in this position, he played bishop g7, and I played g3, fianchettoing, and he castled, and I played bishop g2, and I was thinking in this position he might play c5, going into kind of like a Benoni structure. And the reason why I was thinking he would play this move is that after d5, my pawn is blocking in my bishop. And if I don't play d5, then what would I do, you know? If I castle, then he can take on d4, and now the e5 square is really under his control. So I think that if he would have played c5, I think I would have played d5. And in this position, you know, this is the Benoni, I think. And you know, this bishop is just vicious on this diagonal. You know, he's going to play b5, you know, rook b8, all kinds of stuff. You know, it's a game. It's not necessarily that black's better here, but the key difference that I noticed is that a lot of times in the Benoni, my light-squared bishop is on d3 or e2. But in this position, it's on g2. And now this pawn on d5 is kind of in the way of its influence. And so I felt like if he played c5, then it would be less to my liking, because in this game I really wanted to influence this diagonal. That was kind of what I wanted to do. Okay, but he didn't play c5. He played after d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, g3, castle, bishop g2. He played d6. And I think the reason why he played that is because it's closer to the theoretical lines in the mainline King's Indian. And he knows it's a good move. You know, d6, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this move. So, you know, it opens up the bishop. Maybe this knight can go to d7. So it's a game. And maybe in this position, white's going to play e5 or c5. Cracking and taking a stake in the center. So, you know, there's some good plans that go with d6 too. In this position, I castled. Got to get that development going. And he played knight b d7, which is a developing move. It prepares pawn to e5 or pawn to c5, right? Striking in the center. And in this position, I played knight c3. And he played an interesting move, pawn to c6. I don't know if this is a mainline theoretical position. Like I said, I was out of book on move 3. And whether he's out of book or not, I really don't know. I guess he can tell us whether or not he was out of book. I guess an option here for white is to play e4. But the reason why I didn't play it is because then we get into some kind of mainline King's Indian position that I was trying to avoid with the whole knight f3 stuff. So I didn't play that. In this position, what I do notice is that black has some reasons why he played pawn to c6. Okay. I think this pawn to c6 move is a multi-purpose move. It blunts this bishop on g2, right? Because the pawns on b7 and c6 kind of blunt this bishop. And I think what it does is it prepares pawn to d5. So let's just burn a move for white and see if part of the idea behind pawn to c6 is to play pawn to d5. Let's see. Let's say I played nothing. Let's say I played a3. And then he plays d5. What's happening in this position? Because in this situation, what black can do is get a strong pawn on d5, which is potentially strengthened with a pawn on e6. And the reason why this kind of structure might be favorable for black is that it blunts this bishop, right? And the pawn on e4 is a target for the black pieces. Maybe a knight is going to get to e6. A possible idea would be something like rook e8, knight f8, knight e6, and he's got this tremendous pressure on the d4 pawn. You know, in this position, as white, I guess I could take it, and then he would take it. And now let's say I made another nothing move and just played b4. Then he can play d6. And this chain restricts my bishop, right? I guess it's still a game because I can play e4. So I'm really not 100% sure why c6 was played, and I'm assuming that maybe c6 was played to support a d5 pawn move. Also a little side note: after c6, the queen can come out to a5, right? So I'm not entirely sure why the queen would go to a5. Maybe on a5 the queen can swing over here to h5 and then work with the knight on g4 to attack to attack the pawn on h2. So anyway, so this c6 move was interesting, and I'm not entirely sure of its intentions. Maybe black wants to play b5, and that's what he tried to do. So let's move on. After he played c6, I decided to play pawn to b3. And the reason why I played that move is I was concerned about the dark squares on the chessboard, and it seems a little anti-intuitive. Playing b3 weakens dark squares, right? It weakens a3 and it weakens c3. However, what it does do is it allows me to play bishop b2 and neutralize the long diagonal. And I thought to myself, because I do know in a lot of mainline King's Indian positions, black's dark squared bishop on g7 becomes a monster. It just becomes a monster of a piece. And so I thought to myself, if I trade off my dark squared bishop for his dark squared bishop, then that's good for me, right? Because I've gotten rid of a potentially menacing piece. But I'm really not sure. I think that after the game, my friend criticized this move b3. He didn't expect it, and he didn't like it at first glance. And the reason why he didn't like it was because I think he made the comment that he prefers the bishop to come out to g5. Or he was expecting the bishop to come out to g5. And the reason why I didn't like this bishop g5 stuff was that after he plays something like h6, I don't want to take his knight for my bishop. And the reason why I don't want to take his knight for my bishop is for the reasons that I previously said. This dark squared bishop becomes a monster, and I have to ask myself, how am I going to neutralize that? And so after h6, I wouldn't take the knight. I would probably play something like, I don't know, bishop d2, right? But then what have I done? I've played bishop g5, he's played h6, and then I went back to d2, and it's his move. So it's essentially the exact same thing as saying if I played bishop d2 here, right? And then it was his move. But he's played h6, right? And that's a weakening move. However, do I want my bishop on this diagonal? Is that where I want it? Not really. It's not really doing a whole lot there, and it's blocking a heavy piece, a queen or a rook from the d file. So I don't know. I just decided on the fly that I thought that the a1 h8 diagonal is a better diagonal for my bishop. And maybe I could have gotten it there anyway by moving this knight and then putting it on c3. I'm not sure. So the placement of my dark squared bishop is under question. It's officially under question. In the game, I decided to play b3, okay? And it kind of worked out for me. Let's see what happened here. So after I played b3, in this position, I think he played rook b8, but let me just check my score sheet here. All right, so this is move 8. Yeah, he played rook b8. And after the game, we were talking about it, and the first thing that he said was that he thinks that his move, rook b8, is a blunder. He says that he does not think that's a good move. Now, I think it's an okay move. The reason why I think it's an okay move is that it prepares to play b5. And then after b5 happens, then this c-pawn is under question, right? Which makes it easier for him to play d5, which is what I thought he wanted to do with c6. And so because he wants to play b5, let's say I make a nothing move. Let's say I play h3 here, and then he plays b5, and then it's my move, right? I cannot play bishop b2, right? Because after he takes my pawn, and I take his pawn, ouch. Don't I lose a bishop here? That's what it looks like to me. So I thought that rook b8 was a pretty good move because of that situation there. Because it stops me from playing bishop b2. Because I played h3 here, right? Okay, if I play bishop b2, which is what I wanted to play, and he plays b5, it's my move. I guess that what I could play is rook b8. And then if he takes on c4, then I take on c4. He doesn't get my bishop, but what he does get is d5, right? And then I have an isolated... No, it's not an isolated d-pawn. Interesting. I guess if he takes on c4, then I can play e3, and my pawn isn't isolated. Okay, so maybe this was playable. Maybe I could have played bishop b2. I think during the game I thought to myself that I cannot play bishop b2 here. And I thought because after b5, rook b8 takes, it's equal, right? I guess it's equal here? I don't know. I'm really not sure. That needs to be looked at. And so in the game, I decided to play, after he played rook b8, I decided to play a4. And I didn't really like that move. It wasn't a move that I really wanted to play, and the reason why it wasn't a move that I wanted to play is because during the game I was saying to myself, I need to develop. You know? I mean, this queen on d1 is not developed. This bishop on c1 is not developed. So I said to myself, why would I play a4 when these two pieces aren't developed? And I think that my logic for playing that move, what I decided in my head was that, well, he still has a bishop not developed and a queen not developed, right? Yeah, so I said to myself, okay, development is about equal, and maybe I should stop his plan of playing a5, right? Because in this position, if he plays b5, I take his pawn, and then if he takes my pawn, then don't I win a pawn here with knight takes b5? And I'm also on the a7 pawn. So I felt like my move stopped his plans of rook b8. That's why I played a4. I guess that a developmental move might have been better than a4. But what would that be? Like I said, the only developmental move that I really wanted to play was bishop b2. But then after b5, I mean, isn't it just like, what have I accomplished? You know, development is even. It's just a game. I guess maybe bishop b2 might be better. I really don't know. Okay, so I played a4, and a4 is fine. I think that a4 is absolutely fine. And so what did he play? After I played a4, he played c5. And this is the move that I think is very interesting because, you know, why would he play c6 and then play c5? Why would he spend 2 moves playing c5 when he can just spend 1 and move back? So let's go back a couple of moves to when he played pawn to c6 and see what happens if he just plays c5. Okay, in this position right here, he played c6. Okay, so what's wrong with c5 here? In this position. And the reason why I'm saying that if black wanted to play c5, then he should play it now, because it loses, or it saves him a tempo, right? Because he spent 2 moves to play c6 and then c5. In this position, he can play c5. I don't see anything wrong with pawn to c5 here. What's wrong with it? Absolutely nothing. Nothing that I can see. If I take the pawn on c5, you know, black says thank you very much for the e5 square. So I'm not going to take it. If I play d5, black says thank you very much for the e5 square. And now my bishop is blunted. If I play e3, I guess I can play e3. The idea is that if he takes, then I'm going to take back, and I still have pressure on the e5 square. So I don't see anything wrong with playing c5 immediately And I'm wondering, why exactly Vlad. Or see, there we go. I just said his name. I told you I was gonna do that. His name is Vlad. Okay. All right. So he played c6 question mark. Probably a good move. I played b3. He played rook b8. I played a4, and then he played c5. Maybe after a4, Vlad was thinking that his move pawn to c6 was a mistake. If he was thinking that his move pawn to c6 was a mistake, then what he was doing was he was admitting his mistake. And if that's the case, that's really smart. I think that's definitely very wise to admit your mistake before it gets too bad. Okay, so he played c5, and in this position, I was thinking about playing e3. And like I said, for the reasons before, if he takes, then I take back with the pawn, and that's fine. I can play that. But what I decided to do was, the problem with pawn up to e3 is that it does not develop a piece, right? Right. So I decided that, my pawn on e2 is fine right where it is. And actually, it might be useful on the e3 square, right? Because the pawn on e3 controls d4, a very key square, and f4. So I asked myself, would I rather have my pawn on d4 or e3? And then I said to myself, you know what, I really wasn't sure where I would prefer my pawn. And so I decided to experiment here. And I just played bishop b2. And the reason why I played that is one, it's a developing move. And two, if he takes, it's my move, and I can play knight b5. And that's exactly what happened in the game. And the difference is that now my pawn is on e2, and it's not on d4, right? Because my pawn on d4 would block my dark squared bishop, right? And remember, what I wanted to do was I wanted to neutralize this dark diagonal. I felt like if I neutralized this dark diagonal, it would be good for me. That needs to be analyzed, whether or not, white has to do that. Because like Vlad said, Vlad wanted the bishop on g5 for, whatever reason. And so that needs to be discussed. And so in this position, I played knight b5. Now, I could have played knight takes d4. And I don't think there's anything wrong with knight takes d4. It's he captured and I recaptured. But I'm moving the same piece twice, right? And do I want my knight on d4? Is that where I want it? Maybe. I guess so. But anyway, I liked my move knight b5 because now I said to myself, okay, I'm giving myself more options. Because now in this position, I can capture the pawn on d4 with my bishop, my knight on f3, or my knight on b5, or even my queen, right? So I'm giving myself more options. And also, now I'm attacking the pawn on a7. And I had this idea. Okay, I said to myself, here, maybe I can get the bishop pair. Okay, so I understand that the bishop pair isn't everything in chess. But what I do understand is that if white has the bishop pair, then, that's worth like a third of a pawn in material. And I could possibly have an endgame where I have a bishop and he has a knight. And that's good, right? To have that kind of an endgame in an open position. So here I was thinking that, okay, if I play knight b5, then maybe I can put my knight on a7 and get the bishop pair. And so I think this move is good. And he played in this position, he played queen a5. And I think that queen a5 is a mistake. And he wasn't so sure if it was a mistake. I'm like 100% sure it's a mistake. And the reason why I think it's a mistake is that what's funny is that in the game, he actually ended up going back to d8. Because what I do here is I force him to lose time, and I gain the initiative. And during the game, I never thought in my head, okay, I have the initiative. Because if I would have thought that, then I might have made a different decision that you'll see here in the future. And the reason is that the initiative is very valuable in a chess game. It's an advantage. I read in a book once that said that the initiative, if one side has the initiative, it's a temporary advantage. That is, it is an advantage, but it might diminish. It might go away soon. So, I pose this question to all my YouTube followers. What's more important in this game or in chess? I shouldn't say in chess, because I think this question is very specific to this game. And I'm going to pose the question before I put the position on the board. The question is this: what's more important, the initiative or the bishop pair? Because we know, theoretically, having the bishop pair is worth about a third of a pawn, or at least I've read that somewhere. So what's the initiative worth? That has value, but it diminishes, right? So this is an interesting question. I think it's very much worthy to talk about. Okay, so look at my clock. 13 seconds. I'm not sure what's going to happen here if this clock goes down. Let's just wait 7 seconds and see what happens if my clock goes out. Let's see what happens. 2, 1, 0, minus. Okay, so it's just keeping going. All right, anyway, so he played Queen A5. And now, what I'm going to do for you listeners is I'm going to ask you to pause the video and put yourself in my shoes and you know, do the best you can with the position, because this is a fairly complicated position. A lot of stuff is going on here. Now, I think I forgot to say in the beginning, this was a 75-minute game with a 5-second delay. Not increment, a delay. That means that if you make every move in under 5 seconds, your clock will stay at 75 minutes the whole game. I think that, let's see, because I wrote down how much time I had. Okay, so this is move 11. At move 15, I had 52 minutes left on my clock. So I probably had something like 60 minutes on my clock here. So go ahead and pause the video, and when you return, compare your move with the move that I chose. Okay, so you've paused the video and you're back. I'd like to welcome you all back, and the move that I chose is bishop takes d4. You know, this was interesting, and there was a lot of different ways that I could have taken this pawn. And I chose to take it with the bishop mainly because these two guys are already developed, right? And also, this bishop really puts pressure on the pawn on a7, right? And obviously, if he plays something silly like e5, I win with bishop takes a7. Okay, and the pawn on d6 is hanging. So it's not like he can tempo this bishop so easily. I want to go back just one move. In this position, what if, you see, I thought that, because I played knight b5, right? And I thought that if black plays e5, just defending the pawn, then I can take on d6, right? But let's look at this position. What in this position, if he plays, say, queen... well, why am I moving the queen? He doesn't have to move the queen. What would black do in this position? I don't know. Let's just burn a move. Nah, let's make a good move. Okay, let's say black played queen c7. And then I take the bishop, and then he takes. What's going on here? Black has pawns on e5 and d4, right? And that blunts in his bishop. But, there's a but here. Black has a pawn majority on the queen side, right? In this position, or I'm sorry, on the king side, black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns, and white has 1, 2, 3, 4. And these two guys might be advancing really, really soon. So I ask myself, and I'm asking you YouTube listeners, in this position right here, should black just play e5? Right? That's the question. I decided that black shouldn't, and the reason is because of knight takes d6. But that might not be a good enough reason, because this position might be good for black. It requires analysis. He didn't play it. like I said, he played queen a5, and I think that's a mistake, because after bishop takes d4, which is what happened in the game, he played in this position he played a6, and I also think that that's a mistake. But maybe not. Maybe it's not a mistake. Okay, in this position, I decided that before I move my knight, I wanted to get his queen off of the 5th rank. Because if I just go ahead and play knight a7, and then he plays queen h5, what happens here? What happens in this position? Maybe this queen is embarrassed on h5. I really don't know. I really just don't know. This requires analysis too. So I decided to play this way. I played bishop c3, and oh, you want to know why I played this way? Because I wanted his queen to go back to d8. That's why I played this way. Okay, and he played queen b6, and then I played a5. And the question is, what if he plays queen c5 here? The idea of trying to go over to h5. What happens here? Is this queen going to be embarrassed? I really don't know. I mean, after I don't know, after bishop d4, where's his queen going to go? Over here to h5, and now it's my move. I'm not sure what to do here. Maybe I can play knight c7 and then over to d5. I really don't know. But Vlad might have smelled a rat here, as all rats would say. In this position, he did not play queen c5. He played queen back to d8. Okay, so let's take stock of what's going on here, of what's happened. In this position, Vlad has wasted he's wasted 3 moves. 3 tempo moves he's wasted, right? Now, in the game, I did not think that to myself. I did not think to myself, okay, he's wasted 3 tempo moves. That means that white might have the initiative, right? Right, okay. So this was the question I had. What's more valuable, the initiative or the bishop pair? Okay. Because in this position, if I would have asked that to myself, I might have played a different move than what I played. Because if I value the initiative, I would have probably played knight d4 here, keeping the pieces on. Right now, black has 2 pieces undeveloped, and it's not going to be too incredibly easy to develop them, right? Right? And I'm ready to, swing my queen over to d3 and put a rook on the d file, right? Maintaining a sort of steady initiative. But instead, so now let me just, for my listeners that don't understand what I said when I said that black wasted 3 moves, let me clarify that. Black spent 1 move going to a5, and then another move going back to d8. And if we go back a few moves, so that's 2 moves wasted, right? And if we go back a move or 2 here, black spent 1 move playing c6, and then another move playing c5, right? After these moves, in this position, he played c5. So that's why I said 3 wasted moves. Maybe it's 4, I don't know. But anyway, the idea is that he wasted moves. And if I would have said that to myself during the game, black wasted moves, then that might have led me to thinking that I might have the initiative here. And the initiative is worth something. It has value. But like I said, it diminishes, right? If black can get his pieces into the game after wasting his moves, then do I still have the initiative? Maybe, I don't know, but that's the question. Because in this position, after bishop b2, pawn takes, knight b5, queen a5, I take the pawn, he defends his pawn by pushing it, I attack his queen, he goes to b6, I play a5, and then he goes back to d8. So he's wasted 4 moves here. In this position, if I keep the pieces on, then how is black going to develop? And do I maintain a steady initiative? That's the question that I needed to answer in the game, which I did not answer. I didn't even think to ask the question to myself. And I think that's what separates the 1800 player from the 2000 player or the 2100 player. So in this position, I went for the bishop pair. I played knight to a7 and said to myself, wow, I've got the bishop pair. But what I could have said to myself was, wow, I've got the initiative. And the reason why I'm thinking that the initiative in this position might be more valuable is that, you know, if you maintain a slow, steady initiative against a strong opponent, that might turn into, you know, winning the exchange or winning a pawn or winning the game. And in this position, just winning the bishop pair might not result in that. Like I said, winning the bishop pair in this game would probably result in getting a bishop for knight endgame. And that might not be winning, right? I mean, so, and also, I think I should note, this bishop on c8 has not moved. It's never moved. My knight that's on a7 went from b1 to c3, and then c3 to b5, and then b5 to a7, and then from a7 to c8. That's quite a journey. That's a long, long time. I mean, we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4 moves, all to capture a bishop for the bishop pair. Is that worth it? That's what I'm posing to you guys. Is that, does taking the time in the chess game to go from all the way to b1 to a7 to capture a piece that hasn't even moved, is that worth it? I don't know. You know, now that I'm posing these questions, this is what's so interesting about chess, is that it's more than just making moves. It's about a thought process. It's about very specific strategic thinking. Okay, so that's my question, and I hope that we have an interesting discussion about it. So after I played knight a7, he went ahead and played knight c5. Okay, his idea is that maybe if I don't take the bishop, then his bishop is going to come out over here to f5 or e6, and then what's my knight doing over there on a7, right? So I captured it, and then you know, whoopee, I've got the bishop pair. Okay, but what I didn't analyze was the time it took to get the bishop pair, and time is so important. And you'll see what happens here. So he took back with his queen, and now it's my move. And now, if you can tell, I made a capture and he made a recapture, right? And that's what you want to do in chess, is you want to recapture, not capture. Okay, so in this position, I played, what did I play? Okay, I played a move that is criticized. Now, during the game, I felt like it was a really good move. And in this position, I played knight to d2, which is a retreating move. But this move has a lot of purpose. First of all, it opens up my bishop, right? Second of all, it stops him from putting a knight on e4 that harasses my bishop, right? Because now if he puts a knight on e4, then I just take it and it's free. And what it also does, this is the meaning, this was the real reason behind knight to d2. My knight on d2 controls or defends the pawn on c4. And the reason why I want my knight defending the pawn on c4 is that in this position I want to play b4. Or in the game I wanted to play b4 and then b5 and get an outside passed pawn. After a takes b5, I was going to take back with the c pawn. And then in that position, I'd have a pawn on b5 and a5 versus his one pawn, where I can get an outside pass pawn. That was the plan. And in this game, it never happened. I got crushed. What ended up happening was I ended up having a pawn on b4 and c4, but I was never able to get that move, pawn to b5 in. And what was then what was left over was hanging pawns. I had hanging pawns on b4 and c4, and they were beautiful, wonderful targets for his knights. And man, Vlad, he played it great. So So let's see what happened here. That's the reason for knight to d2. I think that Vlad said in this position he thinks I should have played knight d4, and I think he's right. And knight d4 is better because on d4 it controls c6, and it makes it really, really hard for black to play b5. So my idea of putting the knight on d2 to control c4 to play b4 is structurally possibly flawed, because it's really, really hard to get the move pawn to b5 in, and then what's left is hanging pawns on b4 and c4, which are targets. Now, one thing I can say, the reason why... Now, I did consider knight d4 during the game, but I thought that after he plays something like knight e4, attacking my bishop, I felt like that was too annoying to deal with. But I'll tell you what, man. The annoyance of having to move a bishop is a lot less annoying than having to deal with two structural weaknesses. Two pawns on b4 and c4 that are very hard to defend and very hard to push forward. Okay, so I think that was a flaw in my judgment. I was too worried about knight e4, but all that knight e4 does is attack a bishop. So what? I'll just move the bishop. Okay, so in this position, I played knight d2, which is passive. And he played b5. Boom, breaking. And now, I don't know if this move is possible if I would have played knight d4, right? If I would have played knight d4, what happens after b5? Knight c6, right? Threatening to win his queen. What would he do here? I'm not sure what he would do. I really don't know. I can't recommend a whole lot here. Let's say he plays queen d7, and now it's my move. I guess then I could go over here to b4, and that threatens to play bishop in. I don't know. It's at least more complicated than the move knight d2, which is passive. So I'm not sure if knight d4 stops his move pawn to b5, but it needs to be looked at. I played knight d2, and he played b5. And in this position, I took en passant. And the reason why I took en passant is that I have these visions of winning the a6 pawn and then promoting my b pawn to victory. That's the idea. But I was never able to win that pawn. Actually, that pawn was the biggest problem in my game because it controls b5, right? Let me show you what I mean. After I took and he took in the game, his pawn controls b5. And after I played b4, it made it really, really hard to play b5, which is what I wanted to play because that pawn was there. So I guess that if this pawn was off the board, then I would be probably winning after b4, b5. But because this pawn is on a6, and I can't really win it, then this pawn structure, you know, is it good or bad for white? I don't know. It's probably bad, because this pawn on b3 is weak. And once I push it to b4, that makes the pawn on c4 weak. Okay, so in the game after rook takes b6, I played b4, and now what's funny is that he cannot play knight e4, right? Because he loses a piece. After knight takes knight, and he takes back, I played bishop takes bishop, and then when his king takes, boom, there's a piece. But obviously he's not gonna lose a piece. I just wanted to point that out. What he played was knight e6, and this was a great move. This knight is really annoying because it threatens to come into d4 after these bishops get exchanged, which is something I didn't consider during the game. You know, I didn't even consider it because it's like you need to have this X-ray kind of stuff. You know, after these bishops get exchanged, then this knight might be a monster on d4, which, you know, I neutralized with e3. But that created a weakness on d3, which he so elegantly exploited. Alright, so I'll show you what happened. He played knight e6, and I played queen a4. Okay, the reason for queen a4 is to pressure the pawn on a6 and defend the pawn on b4, at the same time controlling the square on b5 so I can play b5. And now my rook can get into the game, right? So I think my move queen a4 is pretty good. There might be something else better, but that's what I played. And he played knight d7. And the reason why he said the reason why he played this move is that he felt that this bishop was annoying. And because he felt that it was annoying, he wanted to get rid of it. And so he said that he was really, really happy to trade bishops. And what's funny is that, remember at the very beginning of the game, that's something I wanted to do. I wanted to trade the dark squared bishops. And so at this point in the game, I was so thrilled to trade off the dark squared bishops, and he was so thrilled to trade off the dark squared bishops. So the question is, who does it benefit? Does trading off the dark squared bishops benefit black or benefit white? That's an interesting question. Okay, so I took it because, that's what I wanted to do, and he took it, and now it's my move, right? And in this position, I found it difficult to play because he was threatening to play knight d4, which threatens forks on e2. So and he was also threatening knight e5, which threatens stuff on d3, attacking the pawn on b4. So, okay, I've got the bishop for the knight, and that's what I wanted. However, his knights get strong squares. His knights go to d4, they go to e5. There's so much that his knights can do. And what's amazing is that I never evaluated that. You know what I mean? In my decision to go ahead and grab the bishop pair, I didn't ask myself, what if his knights get strong outposts? Because if his knights gets a strong outpost, or some strong function, or a strong job on the chessboard that is attacking my hanging pawns, what's more valuable? The knight that is attacking my outposts, or a bishop that has a lot of scope, right? Is my bishop that has all this scope more valuable than a knight that gets a strong outpost? That's a great question, and I hope that some of these questions get answered or just evaluated. I don't expect to find all the answers, and the reason why I'm asking these questions is that I've decided not to use an engine, because engines give you all the answers, right? I want us fellow chess friends to evaluate with our brains and try to find the answers ourselves, because I feel like that's so crucial in getting better at chess. Using the engine to figure out the best moves, I feel like it's a crutch. Okay, so here we go. Let's move on with the game. I got 12 minutes left on this video, so I got to use it wisely. All right, so we traded off the bishops. He took with his king, and then I played e3. And the reason why I played e3 was simply to control d4 and stop his knight from going in there. And so he said, okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go ahead and threaten the square that you left behind. And so I said, okay. And now what he's doing is he's attacking a pawn, right? I'm not sure if he can take it. That's something that's got to be looked at. I played rook c1, defending it, and he attacked my rook. And then I said, okay, now you're not attacking this pawn anymore. So I went rook b1. And in this position, he played a move that I did not consider, and I should have. He played queen b8, and I was like, oh boy, now I'm in a difficult situation, because I cannot push the pawn so easily because of tactics. He wins a pawn, right? And how am I going to defend this pawn? Count the number of attackers. 1 attacker, 2 attackers, 3 attackers on b4. And I have only 2 defenders, the queen on a4 and the rook on b1. And I don't have any other pieces that can join in the fight. So I was calculating a bunch of things like playing b5, and that didn't look good for me because then he gets another strong outpost on c5, along with winning a pawn in the end of it. So I didn't want to play b5, and I also looked at c5, but in this line I also lose a pawn, right? So So playing b5 and c5 I don't think is a solution here. So I played queen d7. And the reason why I played it is that I'm saying to him, okay, if you take the pawn on b4, then I take the pawn on e7. And in this position, I thought he was going to play rook e8. And I thought in this position I was better. Or at least it's a game. And, you know, he can't play like rook b7 because of Ouchtown. I take his rook for free. You know, this bishop is just beautiful here. And, you know, he also can't play queen here because Ouchtown, I take his queen. So I thought this move was really good, and it turns out maybe it's not. He played this really, really good move, which I did not expect, again. So that's twice. He played a move I did not expect. He played queen to c7. And I felt like this move was really good. Because now, if I play queen to a4, then he plays rook b8. And how did I solve my problems? I didn't. I only created more. I'm still going to lose a pawn. So, in this position, I think that the queen exchange is absolutely forced. I took his queen, and he took my queen. And now, how do I defend this pawn on b4? He has two attackers, and I only have one defender. And the only other piece that can defend it is this rook on a1, right? But if I play rook a4, defending it, and then he plays rook b8, now how do I defend it? These hanging pawns, man, it's just miserable. It's absolutely miserable. His knights, I mean, coordinate so well to attack these pawns. Like in the Alekhine's defense or something, where white overextends and black gets to attack weak pawns. It's amazing what happened here. I totally underestimated the weakness of these hanging pawns. And it's very interesting. Okay, so, because of all that, I did not passively defend my pawn, because I don't think it's possible. What I did was I played active. And in this position, I played rook b3. And I said to him, okay, if you take it with your knight, then I'm going to play rook a4, and then there's pins, right? Okay, and obviously if he takes it with his rook, then I just win a knight for free. So he did. He took the pawn. He said, okay, fine. And I said, okay, I'm going to attack the pinned piece. And the reason why I attacked it this way and not this way is that if I attack it this way, then he can play a5, right? Just defending it. But if I attack it this way, then after a5, I just get the pawn back. That was the idea. But in this position, he's not going to play a5. He played rook b8. But there is still a pin here, right? Somewhere there's a pin. Actually, I'm not sure. Probably black is flat out winning here. He's won a pawn, and I don't really see any useful pins here. So in this position, I played. I decided to. I think this is where I collapsed. In this position, I collapsed. In my mind, I decided to sacrifice a pawn. And in doing so, what I did not say to myself was, if I sacrifice a pawn, then he's ahead 2 pawns, and they're both passed pawns on the queen side. I did not say that to myself. What I did say to myself was, okay, if I play c5, and he takes it, and then I play knight e4, I'm attacking his rook, right? And if his rook goes to b5, then I can play bishop f1. And then there's tactics everywhere, right? And if his rook goes there, then I just take it. And if his rook goes over here, which is what he played in the game, then I thought that this knight was now pinned. But it's not. It's not at all pinned, because the knight can go back to c6, which guards his rook. So in this position, I played c5 with the idea of activating my knight with tactics. But it's just not enough. It gave him another pawn. Remember, I just lost a pawn. And here, I lost another one. So, you know, activating the knight, it's just not enough. He played rook f6, and in this position, I kind of knew I was busted. And, okay, so after rook f6, I played, oh man, this was a bad move that I played. I played knight e5, and the reason why I played it is solely to control c6 and to threaten a fork, right? I'm threatening a one-mover. It's like a desperado move, knight e5. And now I'm getting crushed, because after rook d8, he's threatening two things. He's threatening rook to d1 check, and he's threatening rook to d2, attacking the weak pawn on f2 with a rook on f6 and a rook on d2. And in this position, it all went downhill from here. I decided that I wanted to defend the d2 square with my knight on c4. And then if he plays rook d1 check, I was going to play bishop f1 and king g2. I don't know if that's the best plan to get out of this, but it was a plan. And I played knight c4, and he gave a check. And then I played bishop f1. And in this position, he played a great move. He played rook c2. I put the knight on c4 to stop him from getting on the second rank. But what he said to me was, you're not going to stop me because I'm going to put the rook on c2, right? And after the rook goes to c2, I mean, it's just over. In this position, I played... oh, man, I think I'm hopeless here. I played knight e5 with the idea of playing king g2 and knight f3, blocking this rook from attacking f2. That's the idea. And he played h5. I guess he's just probing, trying to get h4 in. I don't know. By the way, he's low on time here, and he's playing really, really good for being low on time. I played king g2, and he played rook c2. Let me just check the score sheet to make sure. He played rook c2 on move 35. Yep. And then in this position, I played knight f3, just blocking the threat on f2. In this position, you can tell black's flat out winning. And he played knight d5. And his idea with knight d5 is to just take the pawn on e3 if this rook ever moves. And also, I think what he wants to do is do this nice maneuver. Knight here, attacking the rook, and then going over here to e4, which threatens f2. In this position, after he played knight d5, I played bishop. Oh, this is, oh man, unbelievable what happened here. This is absolutely unreal. If anybody, if there's some new chess players out here that are watching this video that don't know anything about touch move, you better learn it because this is what happened this game. Okay, during the game, I thought that I could just play bishop takes pawn, winning a pawn, right? That's what I thought. And then as I was touching my bishop, I realized that just loses a piece. After knight takes, that loses a piece. And so I touched my bishop. And I laughed at myself after I did it. I touched my bishop, and then I didn't take the pawn because I realized that it's a counting mistake, but I still had to move the bishop. Because once you touch a piece, you have to move it, unless it's an illegal move. And in this position, the only move that makes any sense at all for the bishop is on d3. And here I'm just flat out lost after knight takes e3 check. And after this position, I was under 5 minutes, and Vlad won rather convincingly with great technique. And what's amazing is that what's funny that I want to note is that during the game, I tried to play rook a1. After touching the bishop and then laughing about it, I tried to play rook a1. And then Vlad said to me, "No, touch move." and the reason why I tried to play it was because I knew I had messed up. And obviously if I play bishop d3 after knight e3, I'm just flat out lost. So I tried to get away with it and move another piece, but he didn't let me. So good for you, Vlad, for not letting me, because I touched this bishop and then I had to move it. So I played here, and then he played knight e3 check. All right, so this video posed some interesting questions. I hope that whoever watched it learned something. I sure did. I thank you all for watching. And Vlad, hey man, you played a great game, and you got the well-deserved win. I missed some things, and analyze this game with me. We'll have some fun with it. All right, thank you, YouTube. I hope you all enjoyed, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.